Felicia, you're safe now. Let the day fade behind you, like a letter sealed and sent away. Gently close your eyes, or let them soften at the edges. Listen for the hush of paper brushing paper, the slow scratch of a fountain pen across old, faded parchment. Breathe in, and imagine the scent of old ink and tea leaves, the quiet rustle of worn uniforms, and the sound of boots passing in distant hallways, fading farther and farther into the background. You're sitting now in a quiet room, perhaps in a converted schoolhouse, somewhere in France or Belgium or along the southern coast of England, where the windows rattle when a train passes, but otherwise remain still, utterly still. You're warm. The walls are thick. The fire in the stove clicks gently. You're a ghost in the back room of a war never quite seen, but always watching. You are a male censor, and you are very tired. Our story tonight begins in the year 1917, in a low-roofed red brick building filled with long, narrow tables and wooden chairs that creak when you lean the wrong way. The room smells of glue, wax, musty envelopes, and fresh fatigue. A dozen other clerks, all wearing the same drab brown uniforms, sit beside you, their heads bent low like cattails in windless weather. Each has a stack of mail piled high on the desk, and each holds a fountain pen with a nib worn down to a familiar scratch. The light bulbs above hum with weak yellow flickers, but you don't need much light anymore. You know the shape of fear even when it's smudged. Your fingers are calloused not from weaponry or drills, but from touching paper corners thousands of times a day. You've developed a quiet rhythm: slice, unfold, skim, decide. Slice, unfold, skim, decide. Most of the letters are innocent. A soldier writing to his mother, a nurse sending quiet news to her sister, a wife enclosing a dried flower and an uncertain promise. You barely read the full thing anymore. Your eyes scan for certain phrases: the location of the trench, the size of the battalion, the condition of the wounded, the names of the dead, the direction of movement. You strike these things out with thick black ink, or cut the page entirely, or set the letter gently in the burn pile if it speaks too clearly, too dangerously, or too honestly. But sometimes you stop, just for a second. Not long, just long enough to feel it. The trembling of a private's pen as he admits to crying in the night. The careful language of a young woman who suspects her husband is no longer writing only to her. The desperate tone of a father who knows he won't survive another bombardment and wants anyone, to forgive him for being afraid. You are not allowed to linger, but you do. Just for a breath, just for 1 second more than you should. Then you move on. The stove clicks louder now, and someone brings tea in a chipped enamel kettle. You nod thanks, but do not speak. You haven't spoken much in months. Male censors aren't supposed to make connections. You're not part of the war, not really, and yet you know more than most commanders do. You know where the troops are truly struggling. You know who's hiding the frostbite. You know which units are getting drunk every night and which ones are digging their own graves by daylight. You've seen thousands of different handwritings, but you always recognize the ones that stop mid-sentence. They're the hardest to forget. They arrive with stamps, but no senders. Outside, a train rattles by again, and the glass on the windows hums like bees under cloth. Somewhere far away, the war is happening and earnest men are bleeding in the mud. Horses are collapsing with eyes still open, and officers are shouting orders over the whistle of shells. But in here, In this small, dim room where the war speaks in ink instead of blood, the silence is thick and constant. You've forgotten the sound of wind. Your dreams are full of sentences with no endings. Once, last week, a letter came through in a pale lavender envelope. It smelled like violets, and the ink was dark blue instead of black. The handwriting was perfectly looped, elegant in the old French style, and it was addressed to a soldier you'd already read about twice. He had written to his mother about the lice. He had written to his brother about the dreams. Now someone was writing to him. And for a moment, as you read that letter aloud inside your mind, you imagine what it would feel like to receive something scented, something soft, something with no information of military value, and everything to do with memory. You didn't censor that one. It didn't say anything. Just come back if you can. We are planting the roses. Another letter, folded into a triangle like a child's note, came from a man who had drawn pictures in the margins, tiny boots, a crooked fence, a little sheep with only one leg. You'd almost smiled. You hadn't smiled in days. But when you flipped to the back, he had written 3 lines too clearly. We are near the forest by Soissons. The men are ill from the last gas. The food is mostly gone. You dipped your pen in the ink, steady as a surgeon, and blacked it out. One clean sweep. Then another. Then the whole page. You sleep in a small bunk behind the sorting office now, because the walk back to town grew too long, and your body is stiff from sitting. You haven't felt warm sunlight in weeks, but sometimes you place your hand over the envelope heater and pretend. On Sundays, the fire is allowed to burn longer, and you wrap yourself in a scratchy blanket with someone else's name still stitched into the hem. You don't ask whose. You don't want to know. The job isn't dangerous, not in the way most jobs are during wartime, but it wears you down in slower, subtler ways. It makes you forget your own name. It makes your dreams smell like glue and smoke, and yet you stay, because someone has to read these. Someone has to guard that the stove has gone quiet now, its last few embers glowing faintly beneath the iron grate. It's late. You haven't looked at a clock in hours, and the light outside has faded into a colorless shade somewhere between coal, smoke, and fog. The town is quiet. The station platform across the road, once alive with boots and crates and coal-streaked shouts, is empty now. Only a few crates remain stamped and sealed marked for the front. Somewhere among them are new bundles of letters. And soon, those bundles will be yours. Your eyes ache, but you don't blink as much anymore. You've learned to keep your gaze steady, to drink less water so you don't need to get up, to move only when absolutely necessary. Your fingers have the rhythm memorized, now split, the envelope clean, with the small ivory blade. Unfold the pages without tearing the edges. Find the date, the place, the name, then the core of it. What are they trying to say, and what must you make disappear? One of your colleagues, his name is Davies, or maybe Davison has taken to humming while he reads. Not loud, just a ghost of a tune, something tuneless, and wavering like a lullaby remembered from years ago. You don't mind. It helps fill the space. The room used to feel too silent, almost sacred, like a library in a cathedral. But now the soft humming reminds you that there are still people here, still minds drifting beside yours, still others who carry the weight of what they know. Today the letters are heavier, not in weight, but in feel. You notice it instantly, the difference in tone, the sudden sharpness, the smudged ink that speaks of shaking hands. Something has shifted at the front. Something dark, something unsaid but widely felt. The letters are full of metaphors, now soldiers riding a fog that won't lift, of the earth trembling beneath their boots, of rats fleeing early. You read between the lines because you must. Because even if they don't say it outright, they want someone to understand. They want someone to know that something is coming. You pick up a letter addressed from a lance corporal in the 1st Essex Regiment. His handwriting is jagged but eager, the kind of energy that belongs to someone young enough to believe their words still matter. He describes the new trenches they've been assigned, dug too shallow, he says, filled with standing water. His boots haven't been dry in 6 days. He tells his mother not to worry. He always tells her that. And then he adds something that makes your hand freeze in midair. They've brought in the new shells, the ones that make no sound until the sky breaks. We're told not to look up when they fall. You dip your pen into the ink and draw a quiet line over the sentence. It must go. You don't want it to, but it must. You fold the page and stamp it. Approved. Then move on. Some letters arrive already opened, already read. You recognize the blue wax seals of the French military censors. They work faster than you, rougher. Some pages are slashed in half. Others arrive in tatters. You've heard the rumors that some censor stations burn whole bundles by mistake or by order, or just by some private judgment no one questions. You try to be more careful. You try to remember that every page is a person, a voice, a breath taken in a trench sent across 1,000 miles, waiting to be heard. It's nearly midnight when you find a letter written in pencil, addressed in the soft, slanted script of someone who once went to school but hasn't written years. It's from a man stationed at Ypres. You recognize the name he's written before. In earlier letters, he spoke of the countryside, of the trees that still bloom even with the bombs, of a nightingale that sang in the shattered orchard just beyond the wire. This letter is different. It's short, barely a page, and the last lines are stained not with ink or rain, but something saltier, something more human. He writes, I cannot feel my hands anymore, not from cold, just from not using them for anything but holding the rifle. I forget how to write my name without thinking of pulling a trigger. You stare at the words for a long time. They don't mention troop movement, no military detail, nothing technically censorable. So you let it pass, but your hand trembles as you fold the page. The fire in the stove has finally died out. You wrap your shawl tighter, though the chill doesn't quite reach your bones anymore. It's a different kind of cold that lives in this place, a stillness that seeps through the paper and into your joints. You imagine what it would be like to leave this place, to return to a life without letters, but you can't picture it. You've read too many names, too many promises, too many truths hidden in sentences meant to deceive and comfort at the same time. You keep a small notebook tucked beneath your blouse. You're not supposed to. It's against regulation. But you write down fragments, only the ones that haunt you, only the sentences that won't let go. You never copy names, just lines, just whispers. You tell yourself it's so you can remember later what this war really sounded like. Not in speeches, not in headlines, but in the quiet space between ink and silence. You don't show anyone the notebook. You never will. But it's there, always like a second heartbeat. Tonight, the final letter in your stack is sealed with wax in the shape of a thistle. Scottish. You recognize the emblem from a unit stationed near the Argonne. The letter is heavier than the others, not in pages, but in weight. You feel it before you open it. It's written in French, oddly enough, but addressed to a woman in Sussex. You read slowly, each line soft and precise, written by someone who knows exactly how to say very little and still say everything. The writer speaks of silence, of footsteps on frost, of the sound a man makes when he cries and doesn't know anyone is listening. There is one line: the morning creeps in like a soft mist through an old curtain. It arrives slowly, pale and reluctant, slipping through the edges of the window glass without ever fully lighting the room. You stir at your desk, stiff-necked and unsure whether you slept at all. The fire in the stove remains cold. The tin mug you left out has collected a thin skin of dust. You stretch gently so as not to wake the others, though most have already gone. Mail waits for no one. You rise with a soft crack of joints and draw the wool shawl around your shoulders. The room always smells of dust and ink and the faintest trace of boot polish. You run a hand over the next bundle of letters, tied neatly with twine, the paper edges slightly curled from the damp. The station master must have delivered them early. Each envelope bears the tired handwriting of boys who left in summer and are now writing in winter. You can always tell when the season changes by the tone of the mail. Your fingers move automatically, slicing open envelope after envelope with the same smooth motion you've repeated for months. There is something sacred about this ritual now, something you no longer question. These letters arrive as secrets, and you are the one who decides how much of that secret may pass into the world. The first letter you open is short, only 3 lines written on a scrap of newspaper, likely all the soldier could find. It reads, "They're saying it'll be over by Christmas. Same as last year, we've run out of tinned meat, but spirits are high. The lice are worse than the Germans." You mark out nothing. It's the kind of letter people want to receive. Light, dryly humorous, harmless. You set it in the approved pile with a careful hand, as if touching something fragile. The next one is different. The envelope is ragged, reused from another letter, folded inside out and sealed with melted wax from a candle stub. The handwriting is unsure, uneven, barely legible. The date is old, perhaps weeks, delayed in transport. As you unfold the single page, it feels brittle in your hands. The letter is from a young man in the Highland Regiment. He writes to his sister, "The new officer doesn't know our names." He speaks in measurements, how many rifles, how much wire, how long the trench. He doesn't see us, not really. I dream about climbing the stairs at home, just to feel my legs move uphill again. You let the page rest on your lap. There is something unspeakably heavy in that one sentence, just to feel my legs move uphill again. It's not about the war, not directly, but it's about how it's changed him, how it's flattened the world. You run your thumb along the edge of the page, smoothing the crease. You could strike it out, but there's nothing censorable here, just weariness. And weariness, as far as the rules go, is allowed. As the day draws on, you lose yourself in the rhythm once more. Page after page, lives unfold and disappear under your pen. Some are dry, purely logistical requests for money, for cigarettes, for socks. Some are poetic, full of longing and careful restraint. A few are angry, cursing the weather, the officers, the war itself. You must be cautious with those. Anything that might stir dissent cannot be allowed to travel home. A line about a failed offensive disappears beneath your ink. A crude joke about the Prime Minister vanishes, but you never erase the names. You try always to let the names pass through untouched. In the quiet hours, you begin to recognize voices. The same men write again and again. Sometimes their tone changes. Sometimes their handwriting deteriorates. You track their unraveling like a slow, invisible illness. You've seen men go from hopeful to numb in just 3 letters, from descriptive to empty. You never learn what happens after the silence. The letters stop, and that is all you are told. You once tried to trace them, the soldiers, tried to follow their service numbers, check the rosters. But the effort exhausted you, and there were too many names, too many fates, sealed in places you would never go. So you stopped. Now, you let them vanish like mist. There is a drawer in your desk, far to the back, hidden behind spare pens and bundles of twine. Inside are the letters you couldn't send, the ones that were burned in every other station. You keep them, you shouldn't, but you do. Some are too honest, others too heartbreaking. One, from a German prisoner of war writing in English to a nurse in Dover, says simply, "They told me I was not human. You looked at me like I was." That one you've never read twice. You keep it for the way it makes your chest ache. You don't know the names, only the shape of their pain. By late afternoon, the sky outside the windows has begun to darken again. Winter days are short, and the sun rarely makes a proper appearance anymore. The fire has been relit by one of the junior censors young, Miss Elwood, who still cries sometimes while reading. You remember being that soft. You watch her out of the corner of your eye as she pulls her shawl tight and carefully blackens a passage about frostbite and fear. She's learning, slowly. She'll lose the tears soon. The final letter of the day arrives by hand and urgent delivery, tied with blue ribbon and bearing the seal of the War Office. You accept it quietly and set it aside. It's not for you to read, but you will, later, when no one else is here. The blue ribbon slips off like a breath held too long. It falls in a soft coil onto your lap, where it lies motionless, like a thing too delicate to have ever belonged to war. The envelope is thick, the seal slightly smudged, as if the wax had been pressed by a shaking hand. You touch it gently, just for a moment, then run the edge of your letter knife beneath the flap. The sound is quiet but sharp. In this room, even paper makes noise. Inside is a single page cream-colored, elegant, the ink black and deliberate. It smells faintly of perfume. Not the floral kind worn on the pulse points of young women, but something older, resinous, and dry like pressed lavender or aged cedar. It's not addressed to a name, only a number, a designation. You recognize the handwriting, though you have never seen it before. You recognize it in the same way you recognize frost before you feel the cold. It's a chill written down. The letter reads, "The man you asked about has not been seen since the retreat through Passchendaele. His personal effects have been catalogued. His letters will not be returned. Continue destroying all references to his final post. The matter is not to be revisited. There is no signature." You stare at the page for a long while, your breath slowing as your eyes trace the neat, almost emotionless script. It's not a threat, not a request. Simply a confirmation that someone has vanished, not just from the field, but from history. Erased, even you, the one who has read every sorrow, every confession, every brave lie and quiet plea. Feel a faint unease crawl beneath your ribs. Some letters don't make it through because of what they say. Others because of who they speak of. You fold the page and tuck it into the lining of your satchel. You'll burn it yourself away from this place. Not because you're told to, but because something in you cannot bear the thought of keeping it. There are names that should not be spoken aloud again. The snow begins falling that evening, not heavy, but fine and persistent, like sifted flour over a black table. The flakes cling to the glass panes and blur the outside world, muffling everything into a gentle, white silence. You stay late, past curfew, your lantern flickering low as you sort the day's remains. Pages half-scrawled, notes smudged by rain, postcards too stained with blood or mud to be legible. You hold each one a little longer than you should, as if waiting for the ink to whisper something more before it fades entirely. There is one that stays with you, a postcard from a French soldier named Jules, who has taken to sketching little pictures in place of full sentences. This one shows a trench turned into a chessboard. The men are pawns. The officers are missing. There is no king, only a grave marker drawn in the far corner. In the bottom corner of the card he has written, "Still here, for now." You don't know if Jules is real, but you've kept all his postcards in a drawer of your own. A little gallery of the war no one will ever display. The weeks pass like smoke rings. You stop measuring them by Sundays or delivery schedules. Time becomes paper. You measure your life by ink stains and stack height. You count your hours in paragraphs. The cold grows sharper, biting through your sleeves no matter how many layers you wear. Your hands chap and crack. The tea turns bitter in the kettle. Outside, the frost gathers like lace on the windows, thick enough some days to block out the sun entirely. And still the letters come. One morning, a sack of mail arrives half-soaked in meltwater, dropped hastily at the door by a messenger with shaking hands. The sack smells of horses and salt and something metallic, perhaps blood, though no one says it. You bring it in, fingers numb, and begin to lay the envelopes out to dry along the stove, like washing after a long day. Some pages are ruined, their ink melted into fog. Others survive, their words rippling with water damage but still readable, still clinging to coherence like the men who wrote them clung to warmth. You find one letter, small and square, that has a child's drawing inside. Crayon, blue and green. A hill, a house, a stick figure waving from the window. You turn it over and find only 3 words in the scrawled hand. Come home soon. No salutation. No date. You imagine the child who drew it kneeling at a wooden table, tongue poking from the corner of their mouth as they try to stay inside the lines. You wonder if the man it was sent to is still alive to see it. Another letter speaks only of silence. The writer describes the trench at night, the way the snow glows faintly in the moonlight, how the wind makes the wires hum like old church bells, how sometimes the enemy sings faint and distant songs with no words, just syllables echoed across no man's land. You close your eyes for a moment and hear it to the hush, the hum, the melody of men trying not to disappear. There is peace in these moments, not joy, not comfort, but peace the kind that comes with stillness, with knowing your place, your role, your tiny thread in the fabric. You do not march, you do not fire, you do not bleed, but you bear witness, quietly, carefully, unseen. You wonder sometimes what it would be like if someone read your letters, if you had written any, if your own thoughts had made it into an envelope, crossed the sea, reached a hearth where someone waited for your words. But you don't write. Not anymore. Not since you began this work. It changes something inside you. Makes your own voice feel too loud, too fragile. You are no longer meant to speak, only to see. At night you dream of paper, endless stacks of paper, taller than buildings. You begin to count the nights by how many candles you burned down to the nub. Their wax trails drip like tiny white rivers down the tin holders, drying in crooked veins across the desk. Some nights the flame burns low and long, dancing softly in the chill, casting faint golden rings across the envelope stacks and the edges of your coat. Other nights it sputters in the draft and dies without warning, leaving you blinking into the dark with your fingers still pressed to the page. You've learned not to be startled. The dark has never scared you, not since you began this work. You know now that most truths are found in silence, and silence lives in the dark. One candle, you remember, melted all the way down and pooled into the drawer crack. You didn't notice until it hardened. Now the drawer sticks when it opens, but you don't pry it loose. You leave it that way, a quiet reminder of how many hours you've sat in this very place, unmoving, unreadable, burning slowly without smoke. Today's bundle arrives in a weather-stained sack, carried by a man with no hat and red hands. He does not speak, only nods, and his boots leave a trail of damp behind him on the floorboards. You thank him with your eyes. He doesn't return the look. The sack thumps heavily onto your desk, and you untie the cords slowly, reverently, like unwrapping something sacred. There are over 200 letters inside, all marked with trembling handwriting and faded ink. A few are torn. One has dried blood at the corner. Another smells faintly of soap and tobacco. The first letter you open is from a man whose writing is curved and elegant, betraying an education he no longer has reason to use. He writes, "The snow is ankle deep now, but it feels like it's inside my lungs. I breathe and it scrapes. I speak and no one listens. I think I am forgetting the shape of a door." You do not mark it. You do not need to. The words will vanish on their own, the way breath fades on glass. You move on. There's one from a woman addressed to a soldier whose unit was last recorded near Verdun. She writes every week. Always the same gentle hand, always the same scent, lavender and starch, maybe a trace of lemon balm. You've read her letters before. You've read dozens. Sometimes she includes a pressed flower, other times a prayer or a folded joke from the local paper. But today, the letter is short, just a single line. "I haven't heard from you in 63 days, but I still boil water for your shaving bowl each morning. You let it through, not because it matters, but because you need it to. There are patterns, always. A shift in tone, a region that grows quiet, a battalion whose letters arrive thicker with grief. You learn to read these rhythms. You notice, without needing orders, when a place has fallen or when an officer has died. Sometimes you learn the truth days before the public does, before the men's families even know. And yet you must read the mother's hopeful lines, the child's drawings, the notes about birthdays waiting to be celebrated. You carry that weight in your fingertips. A junior clerk drops a bundle on your desk around mid-morning, her eyes rimmed red, her blouse damp at the collar. She says nothing, only slides the stack forward and turns away. You see what she saw, a collection of letters recovered from a sunken field ambulance, waterlogged, crumpled, barely legible. One is opened already, half-read and forgotten in her haste. You pick it up carefully and smooth the page. They won't. You are the last to leave the room tonight. Again. The others have gone, some to shared quarters with canvas beds and wash basins, others to the canteen for tea that tastes faintly of coal. A few return to billets down the road, where newspapers pile up unread and boots dry slowly by the door. But you remain, alone in the flickering light of a nearly spent lantern, finishing the final pages of the day. You tell yourself you stay for the work, but in truth it is the silence you've grown to need, the hush that follows hours of reading, the stillness after stories too heavy to speak aloud. The last letter on your desk is one of the strangest you've read. Not because of what it says, but because of what it doesn't. It's unsigned, undated, written in short, declarative sentences. No salutation, no address. Just thoughts cut short, scattered like dropped coins in the dark. The water here tastes of rust. We sleep with our boots on. One of the men hums all night long. I think he used to be a teacher. I miss buttons. Real ones. Not the brass kind. I miss being asked questions. You read it twice. Then a third time. There is nothing in it to censor. But you hold it anyway, as if it might start speaking again. When you finally fold it and tuck it into the approved stack, your fingers pause just a moment longer on the paper's edge. The longer you do this work, the more you find yourself craving the strange ones, the dreamers, the fractured minds, the souls that find poetry in dry boots or broken laces or barbed wire curling like vines. These are not just letters. They are pieces of people shed like skin and mailed back home to prove they once existed. You stand and stretch, your back clicking like a drawer being opened too fast. The room breathes around you, timber groaning in the walls, kettle cooling on the stove, floorboards creaking with memory. You blow out the lantern, but wait before moving. Let your eyes adjust. Let the dark wrap itself around you like a wool cloak, warm in its way. This is a darkness, you know, one that holds you gently. You sleep in the back room now. The cot is narrow, the mattress stuffed with straw that pokes through the seams. You keep a small box beneath it, filled with things you can't name aloud: postcards, torn pieces of ribbon, the faintly waxy page from a telegram no one was supposed to read. These are not souvenirs. They are fragments, anchors, reminders that the words you hold are not just ink, but echoes. Tonight you lie down slowly, the chill clinging to the blanket. You curl toward the wall, listening to the wind beyond the stones, and pull the corner of the blanket over your mouth, as if to stifle a thought you don't want to finish. You dream quickly, almost instantly, falling into that soft gray between sleep and memory. In your dream, you're back at your childhood desk, where the window looked out on a chestnut tree, and your pen was always full. The pages wrote themselves. No war, no black lines, just stories. You were always going to be a writer. You remember that. But the morning always comes. It creeps back through the cracks in the window pane and across your eyelids until you must rise again, stretch again, tie your hair back with fingers that feel older than your face. You wash in a tin basin with water so cold it takes your breath. The kettle sings again, and the sacks arrive as they always do, bundled and damp and full of things never meant for you, but now forever yours. Today's letters are heavier. You know it without touching them. They sit lower in the sack, thicker, more compact. These are after the push. after the artillery, after the wire and mud and loss. These are the letters from what comes next, the survivors, the wounded, the voices speaking through clenched jaws and bandaged hands. You untie the first bundle and begin. One letter is stained with iodine and folded into a torn scrap of field medical notes. You read it carefully, the penmanship fractured but determined. My right hand won't stop shaking. They say it's nerves. I think it's something else. I think it's the sound. I can't stop hearing it, even in the quiet. You place the letter aside. You've heard that line before, from different mouths and different phrasing, but always the same core. They're ringing, the silence filled with echoes. Another letter is more formal, from an officer, polished, cold, meant to reassure. It lists the number of blankets distributed, the rotations managed, the rations accounted for. It says nothing of the fear, of the frostbite, of the boy who sat down and never stood again. You mark nothing, but it's the kind of letter that makes you tired not for what it says, but for what it carefully avoids. Then comes a postcard, black and white photo on one side, a mountain view, probably copied from a tourist print long before the war. On the back, just a single sentence in shaky pencil. There's a tree in the courtyard here. It's the only thing that hasn't moved. You fold it slowly, place it atop the others. You think about that tree. You hope it's real. The room grows warm from the stove, but it never reaches your feet. The cold settles in your ankles, curls around your shins, makes your movements stiffer than you'd like. You keep working. One more letter, then another, then 10. Your breath catches as your eyes trace the name your own, centered on the envelope in a faded gray ink that looks almost like charcoal. It's spelled perfectly. The loops and the letters feel practiced, familiar, yet you're sure you've never seen this handwriting before. Your hands hesitate. For a long moment, you simply hold the envelope, feeling its weight, studying the edges for clues. The seal is unmarked. No military crest. No ribbon. Just a plain fold, as if it had been closed by fingers in a hurry, or by someone who knew you wouldn't throw it away. You open it slowly, letting the paper part with a whisper. The room feels stiller than usual now, as if even the stove is holding its breath. The folded page inside is thin, brittle, written on a kind of paper rarely used by soldiers, smooth, cream-colored, untouched by rain or soot. The words are written in pencil, neat, small, and even. A hand trained in quiet things. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I think you're the one who sees everything and says nothing. The one who remembers what the world wants to forget. The one who listens even when no one is speaking. Your heart thuds once, not hard, but enough to stir a feeling you don't quite have words for. The letter continues. If I'm right, if you're the one who has held all our names in your hands, then this is not just for you. It's for all of us. For the ones who couldn't write, for the ones whose pages never arrived, for the ones who wrote but were never read. You glance around, suddenly unsure if you are alone. But the room is empty. The only sound is the faint ticking of the wall clock, counting down to no particular hour. You look back at the letter. I want to tell you what it's like to forget the shape of your own voice, what it's like to hold a pen and find that your hands no longer know the way, what it's like to dream in silence every night because you haven't heard laughter in months, what it's like to wonder whether anything you say matters, or whether it will all be struck out with a single black line. Your eyes sting. You blink once, slowly. But mostly, I want to say thank you for reading us, for listening, for letting even the smallest parts of us survive. I don't know your name, but I know you exist. I know you're there, and I think that matters. There is no signature, no closing line, just the weight of the words hanging in the air, soft as snow. You fold the page with care, far more gently than you usually do, and you place it into the drawer that sticks, the one with the wax and the confessions and the trembling truths that no one else will ever read. You sit back slowly, staring at the drawer for a long time. You've held thousands of letters, but this one holds you. The rest of the day passes like water through fabric. The new mail arrives. The stove is fed. The kettle sings. You read, censor, stamp, and sort, just as always. But something inside you has shifted slightly, like a book that's been nudged off-center on a shelf. A quiet awareness, a soft weight, a presence. That night, when you lie in bed, you do not sleep right away. You stare at the ceiling, watching shadows from the lantern sway like distant branches in wind. Your breath rises in clouds above your mouth. You think of the men in the trenches, of the nurses in the field tents, of the cooks and the stretcher bearers, and the officers who speak only in numbers. And you think of the ones who don't get to speak at all. You rise without sound and open the drawer again. You take out the letter, the one to you. And for the first time in months, you find a blank page and your own pen, and you begin to write, not for duty, not for the office, not for another's eyes, but for yourself. You write, I remember you, all of you. I don't know your faces, but I know your words. I carry them with me. You are not forgotten. You fold the page. You do not seal it. You place it with the others, and in that moment, for reasons you cannot name, you feel something lift from your shoulders, something that's been there so long you forgot it had weight. You blow out the lantern. The room darkens, but it no longer feels cold. The morning arrives beneath a pale curtain of snow, so fine and silent that the world outside the windows looks like it has paused, held in place by frost and the soft hush of falling white. No boots crunch in the lane, no carts rattle past. The world is wrapped in stillness. Even the birds seem unwilling to disturb it. Inside, the walls feel thicker, the air warmer, though you know it's only the fire and the weight of the letter you placed in the drawer last night. It hasn't changed anything, not really. The war still eats up boys. The sacks of mail still arrive. But something inside you is steadier, anchored in the fact that for once you answered back. Today's first bundle is small, only 50 letters. A slow day, perhaps, or a gap between offensives. You welcome the reprieve, though your fingers still move with their usual rhythm slice, unfold, read, decide. The paper smells faintly of damp wool and rusted iron. There's comfort in its consistency, like a familiar book read for the 50th time. The first letter is from a chaplain at the front, and it begins in careful calligraphy. I write to you not as a soldier, but as a witness. You feel your shoulders soften before the sentence is even done. The chaplain describes not battles, not orders, but the quiet in between, the shaving before dawn, the hymns hummed through cracked lips, the shaking hands that still hold the cross around a neck. He writes of burying 3 brothers in one day, and of a boy who asked if angels cry. You don't censor a word. You wouldn't dare. The next envelope is unmarked. No unit, no location, just a name in a town you've never heard of. Inside, the handwriting is coarse, the pencil faint. It reads, "There's nothing left to say, but I keep writing because the silence is worse." You fold it and stamp it. That's reason enough. Some letters arrive with photographs, though they aren't allowed. Technically, all photos are to be removed, burned, before the letter moves on. But not all censors follow that rule. You certainly don't. You hold on to one today, just for a few moments longer than you're supposed, to a small sepia portrait of 2 men leaning against each other in a muddy field, grinning despite the backdrop. Their boots are ruined, their coats too thin, but their faces are warm. On the back, in a looping hand, it says, "Still alive." Imagine that. You close your eyes and place it face down beneath a stack. The fire crackles, and the wind outside picks up. The frost begins to crawl again along the inside of the glass, etching delicate lines like veins across the panes. You sip tea that's gone cold. Your lips are chapped, but your hands are warm from paper and pen, from the quiet heat of words that ache and stretch and survive. One letter is addressed from the Eastern Front, rare in your stack. The paper is thinner, the ink slightly different in tone. The writer talks of wolves, how they've come closer now, scavenging the fields at night, fearless in their hunger. He says they aren't afraid of the guns anymore, that even beasts learn the rhythm of war. You read it twice. You believe him. Another comes from a woman in Devon, writing to her cousin, a nurse stationed near the Marne. She encloses a drawing childlike, but full of care of their family farm, a chicken coop, a crooked oak, a line of smoke curling from the chimney. Beneath it, she writes, the wind still sings in the fence posts. The cows remember you. You smile, faintly. You don't often get letters like this. You let it through without a second thought. Hours pass. You forget to eat. The work is its own sustenance, its own rhythm. You become a metronome of memory. Page after page, heartbeat after heartbeat. You don't feel the chair beneath you anymore. You don't notice the cold. Then, near the end of the stack, you find a letter written on blue stationery, unusually fine, with gold flecks pressed into the corners. You haven't seen such paper in months. The handwriting is elegant, fluent, from someone who once studied the classics. It begins. There's a moment each night, just before I fall asleep in the dugout when I forget what. You sleep in the back room again, curled under the heavy wool blanket with your coat still on. The wind outside whips against the shutters like it's trying to speak, like it, too, has something it needs you to read. You listen for a while, not with fear, but with that deep kind of quiet curiosity that you've grown used to. There are no voices in the wind, not tonight. Just the sound of a world too tired to scream anymore. Your dreams come quickly now, sometimes before your eyes are even closed. They're not like other people's dreams. You don't see faces, you don't fly, you don't run. You see paper, stacks of it, piles and piles. Some soaked in mud, some folded into shapes you can't unfold. They speak in the voices of men you've never met, but somehow know. They tell you things, not in sentences, just in flashes, the smell of gunpowder on cold fingers, a forgotten song hummed in a trench, the sound of someone breathing through tears. You never speak back. You just nod even in sleep. That's your role. That's what you do. You listen. Morning comes without color, just a deep gray, like the inside of an old tin mug. You rise slowly, spine stiff, knees unbending at first. You pour water from the kettle, scrape ash from the stove, and light the fire with the same 3 matches you always use. The crackle is comforting, the warmth distant. You toast the bread someone left behind yesterday and eat it slowly, like it might be the last time you ever taste anything with flavor. The mail arrives with the storm. 2 sacks this time, dripping meltwater across the threshold. The boy who delivers them wears a cap too large for his ears and doesn't meet your eyes. He just nods and disappears. You drag the sacks inside, one by one, leaving slushy trails behind you. You set them down by the stove, the canvas steaming, and you wait. You don't open them yet. Not right away. You just sit. Watch them. Listen to them breathe. You can always hear it, that faint hiss of secrets not yet spoken. The first envelope you pull is different. Bright white. Clean. Untouched by weather or mud. It's from headquarters. You know before opening it. The seal is precise, stamped in dark ink with the symbol of the War Office. You slice it open carefully. Inside is a short memo, typed. No greeting. No warmth. Effective immediately. Censor all mentions of casualty figures, morale decline, or winter trench conditions. Emphasize stability. Remove speculation. Increase turnaround efficiency. You read it twice. You don't react. You've read worse. You place the memo in the fire. Watch it curl and blacken at the edges until it folds in on itself like a sleeping moth. You return to the sack and begin. One letter arrives with a smudge of lipstick on the seal. You almost laugh. You can't remember the last time you saw something so alive. The handwriting is bouncy, crowded with loops and swirls. It's a girl, no, a woman writing to her fiancé at the front. She says she bought new gloves. She says she walks the lane every afternoon and waves at nothing, just in case it's him. She says, I heard there are violets blooming near the line, if you look hard enough. Don't forget how to look for small things. You let the letter pass, untouched. Another comes on yellowed paper, barely holding together at the folds. It's from a father to his son. The language is clipped, practical. He gives news of the crops, the repairs to the roof, the price of coal. But at the end, there is a single line written in a shaky hand. Your mother weeps in her sleep, but she tells me not to tell you. You pause. That sentence hovers, then you black it out. Not because it's forbidden, but because it might do harm. Sometimes kindness and censorship share the same line. The letters keep coming. One from a soldier who writes only in rhyme. One from a nurse who draws small flowers in the corners of every page. One from a man who has stopped using punctuation, as if he can't find the rhythm of thought anymore. One from a boy who pretends to be brave, signing each letter with a made-up nickname no one ever called him. You begin to whisper again. Not every word, just names. You say them softly as you fold the pages. Names are the only things that survive when the letters fade. You speak them into the air as if placing them gently into the folds of a memory that does not belong to you. By noon, the room smells of smoke, paper, and tea. The wind outside is a steady hum, but it doesn't reach your bones. The stacks beside you grow tall again. The fire burns low. The kettle sings. And in the quiet of the room, surrounded by the voices of the forgotten, you feel it again. That still, it's evening now, though the sky barely shifted to let you know. The day never truly brightened, only faded in reverse. You light the lantern with fingers stiff from ink and cold, shielding the flame as it flutters to life. The glass catches a reflection of your own face pale, soft at the edges, older than you remember. You look like a ghost caught behind glass. A librarian of pain. A quiet keeper of things people will never know they sent. The second sack of mail still waits by the stove, heavy and damp. You run your hand along the coarse canvas, then pull the knot loose. The fabric yawns open like a mouth full of stories no one asked to be told. You reach in slowly, drawing out another stack of letters bundled together with twine. You lay them flat on the desk, tap them into alignment, and begin again. The first letter is so tightly folded, it takes a moment to separate the edges. The ink is faded, the paper nearly transparent at the creases, but you unfold it gently, and the words arrive slowly, like snowflakes melting as they touch your skin. We've stopped saying the date out loud. There's no use in it. We just call each day the next one. If we start numbering them, we'll realize how long it's been. You nod without meaning to. It's a truth you've never heard so simply said. You stamp it quietly and move on. The next is from a man in the engineers. He writes about building bridges, planks laid down over wet earth, beams sunk into soil so soft it swallows boots whole. He signs off with, "Funny, isn't it? We make things so they can break again." You don't censor it. You simply fold the page and place it in the pile, like laying a blanket over someone sleeping. One letter has no writing at all, just a pencil sketch. A woman, her back turned, looking out a window. No caption. No initials. Nothing else. You flip the page over and find a single faint note, scratched in the margin. She doesn't know yet. You set the drawing aside. No stamp, no censor. Just a moment too beautiful to touch. Midway through the stack, you find a familiar name. A man who used to write every weak, sharp handwriting Neat block letters, always including a joke near the end, always signing with "still kicking," a puck. This one is different. The writing is messier, uncertain, a hand that trembles. Tell my brother to stop sending sweets. I don't taste anything anymore. Everything tastes like the smell of metal. You mark it softly. The sentence disappears beneath your ink, but it doesn't leave your mind. You pause to sip tea gone lukewarm and look out the window. The wind has slowed, and the snow now falls in perfect silence, flakes drifting like ash, soft and directionless. You wonder how long it's been since the men at the front have seen something so quiet. You wonder how many of them remember snow as anything other than a weight on their shoulders or a cause for numb toes. A thin envelope comes next, just one page. A woman writing to her cousin, a stretcher bearer. She thanks him for his service, tells him her prayers are with him, and then, tucked at the very bottom of the page, almost an afterthought, she adds, "I'm learning how to weave again. The rhythm helps. Sometimes I forget I'm doing it. My hands just move." You fold the letter with more care than usual. You understand, more than she knows. The room begins to dim, shadows stretching across the ceiling like old hands reaching for something they've lost. You light a second candle, then a third. The flicker makes the letters seem alive, words dancing as if they too are trying to escape the page. But you don't mind. You've learned how to read movement as easily as stillness. You know how to find truth in flickers. One of the last letters in the bundle is written in the margins of an old hymn book. You turn it carefully, tracing the tiny script between the printed lines of Latin text. It's from a chaplain, different from the last. This one is weary. I try to remind them of heaven, but they only believe in hot food and dry socks now. I don't blame them. I don't know what I believe either. You close the hymn book and hold it to your chest for a moment before setting it aside. There's only one envelope. You sleep lightly that night. The envelope with the missing letter pressed close to your chest, tucked inside the inner lining of your coat, where the fabric is worn soft and warm from months of repetition. You don't dream in images anymore. You dream in textures, damp parchment, cooling wax, rusted staples, 1,000 papers brushing softly against one another like leaves in a low wind. In your dreams, you're always sorting, always folding, always lifting names that feel more real than the voice you haven't used in days. When you wake, the room feels unchanged. The snow continues its slow, soundless drift beyond the window. The same half-burnt candle greets you with its wax solidified in mid-fall, like a breath caught between words. The stove is cold again, and your boots are stiff, but you move quietly, mechanically. There's no rush, but there's never rest either. Another delivery waits by the door, sheltered beneath a fraying wool blanket laid over the mail sack to keep the snow from seeping in. You smile, faintly. Someone cared enough to cover it. It's a small kindness, like a note written in the corner of a long page. I see you. You matter. You kneel beside the sack, fingers numb, and drag it into the warmth. The fabric leaves a mark in the dust, its own soft signature. You untie the cord, and the scent of tobacco and damp burlap floats out into the air. You breathe it in and imagine you're back in a different life, one where mail meant birthday cards, recipes, Sunday sermons folded in thirds. The letters inside are fewer today, but heavier. Thicker pages, envelopes with sealed flaps, weighed down by extra ink or tucked-in photographs. You begin as you always do. Slice, unfold, read, decide. The first letter you open is addressed to a boy's mother. The handwriting is clean, each line carefully spaced. There are no grammar errors, no smudges. It's not from the boy himself. It's from his commanding officer. You recognize the tone before you read the first full sentence. You've seen these before dozens, maybe hundreds. The words shift around, but the message remains. He fought bravely. He did not suffer. He was an honor to the regiment. It's a letter written for the living, not the dead, meant to protect the mother from the parts of the story that would make it impossible to rise the next day. You scan for sensitive details, but there's nothing beyond the scripted platitudes. You stamp it and place it in the outbox, but your fingers linger on the page before you let go. The next letter is from a private who's written every week without fail since October. His handwriting has grown smaller, tighter. He fills every inch of the paper now, writing up the side margins, squeezing more words into less space. This one ends with a curious note. When I close my eyes, I hear the world before this, the clatter of forks, the sound of my mother stirring soup. I think that's the only way I know I'm still alive. You don't censor a word. You underline it in your mind so you can carry it with you later. Another letter is more abstract, written from someone older, possibly a career soldier. He doesn't speak of battles or commands. He writes instead about the horizon, how the sky turns purple just before the sun sinks, and how sometimes, just sometimes, it reminds him of stained glass. There's a chapel here, bombed out, but the light still comes through the shattered windows. I sit there when I can. It doesn't matter what I believe. It's the quiet that helps. You rest your hand on the letter for a moment before folding it shut. It feels like prayer. The room is warmer now. The fire crackles again, brought back to life with bits of torn paper and splinters from the wood box. You stretch your shoulders and roll your neck, then return to your seat. Another envelope waits. This one is addressed to a name you recognize instantly, not from a letter, but from a drawing. The boy who used to sketch in the corners. Bunk beds, boots, bottles. You've saved his pages before. You expect another, and you're not disappointed. Inside this envelope is a drawing of a spoon. Just a spoon, ordinary, perfectly shaded. Below it in crook script, mine went missing. Had it since training. Drew it so I won't forget it was real. You press your fingers lightly to the image, as if the paper has weight. Then you add it to the small drawer where the sketches sleep.
The room is nearly dark now, lit only by the glow of 2 stubborn candles and the pulsing amber of the stove's coals. Outside, the snowfall has slowed to a fine dusting, turning the road and the hedges and even the crooked fence posts into soft, pillow-shaped ghosts. You can't see anyone out there, but then again, no one ever walks this way at night anymore. Not since the front came close enough that even the trees seem to listen. You sit back down at your desk and find your hands resting, not moving toward the next letter. Just resting. Your fingertips are ink-stained and raw. There's a splinter you've stopped trying to remove, and your knuckles ache from the cold, though you hardly feel it anymore. You realize you've begun to treat this place like a chapel moving slowly, whispering, careful not to disturb what lives between the pages. You didn't mean to. It just happened over time. The last few letters of the evening wait beside you, bundled tight with a string that started to fray. You reach for them gently, untie them with a practiced flick, and begin again. Each letter feels heavier now done in paper, but in presence, you can almost feel the air around them thickening, as though the words inside have weight before they even leave the envelope. The first is addressed from a field hospital near Arras. The handwriting is rushed, slanted, bleeding ink at the curves. It's from a nurse writing on her only break in 2 days. We lost the boy who kept singing. Just yesterday, he asked for hot milk and said he remembered the taste from his school lunches. I didn't have any. So I warmed water and told him to imagine. He said that was enough. You cover your mouth with one hand, not because you need to, but because some stories feel too sacred to breathe over. You place the letter aside, untouched. It deserves to move on. The next envelope is old, postmarked nearly 3 months ago, delayed, weathered. Someone must have misplaced it behind the crate shelves and only just rediscovered it. The paper smells faintly of mildew, and the edges are brittle like leaves in winter. You open it with extra care, and inside is a love letter. Gentle, quiet, private. Do you still think of that morning at the train station? The pigeons, the bakery smell? You were wearing that green scarf and you held my sleeve for just a second longer than you needed to. I think about that more than I think about anything else, especially when I can't sleep. You let yourself smile, just a little. You don't censor love. Never have. The stack grows shorter. A few pages later, you find one that's only a scrap, torn from a ledger or ration form, written in pencil that's barely visible. It reads, "Don't know if I'm writing this for anyone or just to remember what it feels like to write." There is no name, no date. You hold it a moment, then place it in the drawer without a word. One more letter. Oddly formal. Printed, not handwritten, clean margins. It's a mass notice to all censors from Central Command. An updated list of forbidden topics, a reminder that morale is more fragile than ammunition. A suggestion to be more efficient with unnecessary sentiment. You folded without reading the rest. Slide it beneath your bloater. You already know how much is too much. You learned it not from orders, but from the faces behind the words. The last letter in the bundle surprised.
You sleep with the hum of imagined voices still echoing in your ears. Not loud, not frightening, just a gentle murmur of sentences never spoken aloud. The kind of words that live in pages, in margins, in smudged lines and fading ink. They settle around you like a blanket. You don't dream of war. You dream of rooms filled with letters stacked to the ceiling, warm and fluttering, as if the paper itself were breathing in and out, around you. No shouting, no guns, just the endless sound of turning pages. By morning, the fire has burned low again. The frost on the window is thick. The sky outside is that peculiar winter blue, the color of quiet. You wrap your shawl tight and walk to the hearth in your stockings, striking the flint 3 times before the kindling catches. The stove coughs once, then begins to purr. You leave the kettle on top, knowing it will sing when it's ready. Everything in this room has its rhythm, and so do you. You don't wait for the knock. You already know the sacks are waiting outside. You open the door slowly and pull them in one by one, your breath fogging in the cold. The snow is ankle deep now, hiding footprints from the day before. The road looks untouched, though you know it isn't. No place in this war is untouched. Inside you sit. You begin again. The first letter today is from a man who signed with a false name. He's done it before. You remember the handwriting, the clever stories, the jokes too carefully worded to be spontaneous. But today, the tone is different. My trenchmate passed this morning. He used to write letters for the ones who couldn't spell. We all owe him words. So this is mine. You do not remove his alias. You let the mask stay. Some men are braver behind names that aren't theirs. You've learned to respect that. Another letter is simpler. A folded note from one brother to another. No greetings, no pleasantries. Just write me back and don't lie this time. You let it pass. Honesty, after all, is a kind of medicine, even if it stings. A few envelopes later, you find a letter written in green ink. It's from a school teacher who joined late, well into his 30s. You remember his last letter, how he compared artillery fire to thunderstorms and found poetry in the panic. This one is quieter. We have a cat now. She lives in the dugout and comes and goes as she pleases. Someone named her Clemency. I've begun talking to her. She listens better than my old headmaster ever did. You smile, not because it's funny, but because it feels so real. You picture Clemency, her tail curled tight, eyes blinking slowly in the candlelight. You wonder if the men pet her with clean hands or if she smells of smoke and lint and gun oil. You approve the letter, of course, and then you pause. You glance over at your drawer, the one with the letters that don't leave. You consider starting a new one, a place just for small things that don't belong to grief. Sketches of spoons, postcards of trees, cats with ancient names. A reminder that even in the middle of hell, people still look for gentleness. You write a note to yourself and fold it into a page from an old journal. Begin collection, quiet things. Another letter arrives on brown butcher paper, scrawled with a carpenter's pencil, the lines uneven, but strong. It's a man describing a dream he had. I dreamed I was underground digging, not for cover, not for bodies, just digging a garden, and I found an onion. I don't even like onions, but I started crying. I think it was the first time I remembered spring. You let out a breath you hadn't noticed you were holding. You placed the letter under your blotter, not to hide it, just to keep it near. You keep going. A postcard comes from a coastal unit. It's just a painted image of a lighthouse. The back says, still turning, still watching, that's all. You don't know why, but it settles something inside you. A second envelope holds a photograph frowned upon, but slipped through anyway. It's a blurry image of boots hanging to dry along a trench wall. A line of them, like ghosts, upside down. No caption, just the image. You tuck it in your coat pocket next to the name you never spoke aloud. Later in the afternoon, you find another letter written by a soldier who only ever writes lists. You've seen him before. This one reads, "Still raining, found a button in the mud, no mail from home. Dreamed I was in the orchard again, still raining. You let it pass, untouched." You hope someone reads it and understands it for what it is, a confession shaped like routine. The day fades slowly, the candles burning down to soft pools of light. You've nearly reached the bottom of the bundle. You stop and stretch, your joints resisting, your mind thick with the weight of so many words, so many lives carefully passed from one hand to another. Then you find a final letter tucked between two heavier envelopes. It's folded tight and sealed with wax. Not military issue. The seal is floral pressed with something homemade, possibly from a child's desk or a grandmother's drawer. You open it carefully. The letter inside is short, just 5 lines. If you're the one who reads this, please know, I forgive you. I don't know what you've taken away or what you've let through, but I know you've carried it. That's enough. That's more than most ever will. You don't know if it's meant for you, but it feels like it is. You fold the page and place it in your notebook, not the drawer, the notebook your own, the one you never intended to keep. Outside, the snow has stopped. The night is still, and in the silence you whisper one of the names you read today. Just one, just enough to remember. That night, you stay late again, not because you must, but because you don't know how to stop. There's no whistle that dismisses your shift, no bell that signals the day is done. The silence simply lengthens, deepens, wraps around you like a shawl you never removed. You find comfort in the way the paper rustles, in the low groan of your chair when you lean back, in the reliable weight of the stamp as it presses a final approval into the corner of a page. The room is your sanctuary, your secret cocoon of ink and firelight, and you its sole priest. Before bed, you go to the drawer, the sticky one. You don't open it to add or remove anything tonight. You just touch the handle. That's enough. You feel the weight of it, the quiet heaviness that lives inside. You don't know how many letters you've placed there. You've never counted. You never will. They don't belong to numbers. They belong to silence. You sleep that night curled on your side, hands folded beneath your chin, like a child. The warmth from the stove fades slowly, but it's enough. And in your dreams, the letters return not in piles, but as birds. Hundreds of them, wings folded in pages, perching along the rafters, blinking down at you with ink-stained eyes. They do not speak. They do not fly. They simply rest as you do. Morning breaks with gold light through the frost. It's the first golden morning in weeks. The snow has crusted over, sparkling where the light touches it. The air feels lighter somehow, as if something in the weather has finally exhaled. You rise slowly, stretch, and brew tea. The routine is sacred now. You don't rush. The final sack of the week arrives while you're mending a tear in your glove. The boy who drops it off leaves without knocking. You hear only the shuffle of his boots, then silence. You open the door and see the sack resting neatly against the frame. There's a violet tucked into the drawstring, half frozen, but real. You smile. Someone remembers. Inside, you untie the sack. The mail is heavier than usual. Fewer letters, but thicker ones. Folded newspapers. Envelopes packed with clippings and pressed flowers, dried bread, handkerchiefs, scraps of old poems. This bundle is personal. This bundle is love in its least poetic, most sincere form. You begin reading. The first is a letter from a mother who writes each week even though she's stopped receiving replies. Her words are tidy, almost businesslike, but the cracks show through. I've sent 2 pairs of socks and a jar of boiled sweets. Let me know if you got them. I pray for your sleep to be deep, and for you to keep your voice even if you don't use it. You read it twice, you wonder if he's still alive. You let the letter pass. It would only hurt to erase something so steady. Another is from a priest, not at the front, but stationed at a rail depot miles from the fighting. He writes to his brother, who he knows is somewhere near Ypres. Every day I see boys board trains who don't return. Their faces change the moment they step off the platform, like they've entered a different century. I bless them as best I can, but I'm not sure it matters. Maybe presence is enough. You fold it slowly. Stamp it. Let it move on. Later, you find a letter written on the back of a hymn sheet. The soldier has copied the lyrics of a Christmas carol, but changed the words. You don't recognize the melody he's created, but the refrain catches you. Sleep, sleep in boots of clay. Dream of songs from yesterday. Let no gun disturb your breath. Even war must rest in death. You read it aloud, barely whispering. The syllables fall into place like footsteps in soft snow. You tuck it into your coat pocket without thinking. A small envelope slips out from the middle of the stack and lands at your feet. You reach down and open it slowly. Inside is a dried petal blue or purple, maybe. It's brittle, wafer-thin, crumbling at the edges. Folded with it is a single sheet of paper with one sentence. I found this growing near the trench wall. It bloomed through wire. You place it in the drawer. You write without hesitation now, not in reports, not in summaries, not in the style the office prefers. You write like they do, like the soldiers, the nurses, the children, the dreamers. Your sentences come in bursts, then pauses. You don't cross anything out. You don't revise. You simply let the words come, soft as ash and steady as breath. There are days when I feel like a hinge, something the door swings on silently, not open or closed, just a piece in between. I've read 41,522 letters since the war began. I don't remember all the names, but I remember the weather in their words. I remember how cold the page was when someone spoke of their mother's hands. I've stopped trying to forget. I've started trying to hold. You finish your entry and close the book slowly. The candle's flame has shortened now, a low warm bloom in the curve of the dish. The stove lets out one last pop. You can hear snowmelt trickling down the side of the building. Tiny drips into a metal gutter. It sounds like someone walking away. You begin to pack the outgoing letters. You do this gently stack by stack, twine by twine. Some still smell faintly of rosewater. Others of smoke, of cold metal, of bread crust or pencil shavings. The oldest ones crumble at the edges when you touch them, and you pause before setting them down, as if they might shatter. There's no ceremony, no applause, no medals. But you mark the moment anyway. You place the final sealed letter into the canvas pouch. You fold your shawl over your shoulders, and for the first time in weeks you walk out the front door before darkness. The snow is thin, now melting in places, hardening in others. Your boots crunch across the path, down past the telegraph pole, past the empty bench where the supply clerk once waited with his lunch tin. You follow the trail to the train platform where outbound mail is gathered. The guard waves lazily, uninterested. You nod. You place the pouch on the pile. You say nothing, but something in you leans forward, as if listening to the weight shift. On your way back, the wind is gentle. It doesn't bite. It just moves. When you return to the sorting room, you do not relight the fire. You do not brew the tea. You simply sit. The drawer, the one that sticks, you open it slowly. You take out the first letter, the one that was never meant for anyone. You unfold it. You read the words again. Tell her I still remember the way the lamplight caught her braid. Then another, the cows remember you. And another, I don't even like onions, but I started crying. You do not cry, but you feel your throat close the way it does when something sacred brushes too close to the surface. You read each letter again, one by one, until the drawer is empty, until your desk is a patchwork of lives never delivered, never returned, only kept, held. And then slowly you begin to read them aloud, to no one, to everyone, one at a time. Your voice is quiet, frayed, barely more than breath, but you speak each word like it matters, because it does. The room grows dark. The fire dies, the candle burns down. Still, you read. And when your voice fails you, when it grows too hoarse to continue, you close the final letter and press it to your chest. Outside, the sky is velvet blue, and the stars blink softly like the last lines of old poems. You sit there for a long time, and then you whisper the only thing left to say. I heard you.